Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Kristen O'Neill with Foley and Lardner, and I'm pleased to welcome you to today's web conference, a review of BPCI Advanced, the next generation of bundled payments from CMS. I have a few housekeeping items to run through before we get started. First, today's program will last approximately 50 minutes, followed by a short Q&A session. If you wish to ask a question during the broadcast, please type it into the Q&A widget on the left-hand side of your screen. We'll respond to all written questions at the end of the program, time permitting. The presentation is available to download under the resources, and the recording will be posted on Foley.com in the next few days. CLE credits are being offered for this program. We will be announcing a 5-digit code at some point during the presentation. Those seeking Kansas, New York, and New Jersey CLE credit are required to complete the attorney affirmation form. Enter the 5-digit code during the poll and return the program at the end of the session to koneal@foley.com immediately following the program. With me today are Chris Donovan, Fred Galfus, and Dave Terry. Fred Galfus is a partner and healthcare lawyer with Foley and Lardner in our Milwaukee office. He focuses his practice on healthcare transactional matters, including acquisitions, integrated delivery service issues, managed care contracting, and fraud and abuse issues. He has extensive experience with alternative payment program models. Mr. Galfus is co-chair of Foley's Healthcare Industry Team Business and Transactions Work Group. Previously, he worked with the U.S. Department of Justice in Washington, D.C., and served as a law clerk for a federal appellate judge. Chris Donovan is a partner with Foley and Lardner. He focuses his practice on advising companies and their investors and lenders in mergers and acquisitions, recapitalizations, buyouts, and restructuring, as well as advising on a broad range of commercial arrangements, including value-based payment and reimbursement methodologies. Mr. Donovan has particular experience in the healthcare service, particularly post-acute and life sciences sectors. He has a unique blend of deep regulatory as well as corporate and finance experience to bring a transaction as a result of his consummating dozens of health and life sciences deals, both domestic and international. He is co-chair of the post-acute care and senior housing practice and a member of the firm's healthcare and life sciences industry teams, as well as the private equity and venture capital practice. And last, but of course not least, as the CEO of Archway Health, David Terry is a thought leader and frequent speaker on bundled payments and other payment reform initiatives. Throughout his 20-year career in healthcare, Dave has been a senior executive and trusted strategic advisor for providers all along the care continuum. In these roles, he has led care and risk management initiatives with primary care physicians, specialists, acute care hospitals, pediatric health systems, skilled nursing facilities, home care companies, and hospice providers. And now I would like to turn the main portion of our program over to our first speaker, Chris Donovan.
Thank you, Kristen, and good morning, everybody. I just want to thank not only my partner, Fred Galfus, but of course, our co-presenter here, Dave Terry from Archway, and we thank him for participating again in our program. Really excited about this new initiative coming out of D.C. So today's agenda, and we're going to move pretty quickly to hopefully maximize Q&A at the end. We're going to really cover 4 areas. We're going to overview the BPCI Advanced program with 2 or 3 slides. Second, we're going to talk about some of the legal and regulatory issues associated with the program, including both programmatic waivers and fraud and abuse waivers. Thirdly, we're going to discuss a little bit of the overlap with other bundled and value-based program models. And fourthly, and probably most importantly to many people, is to discuss strategies for success with this program and how you can make it work for you as a provider based on data analytics and other strategic advice that you'll hear later in the program. So with that, let's kick it right off. On the overview, many people may be familiar with the original bundled payment care initiative that came out of the government initially that had 4 different models. This is the latest model subsequent to the original BPCI program. The original BPCI program will conclude this September 2018 unless it's extended. So this is really the first bundle payment program under and initiated from the Trump administration. There have been some program changes during the Trump administration. Some people, if you may be familiar with the Comprehensive Joint Replacement BP program that was initially mandatory and now is voluntary. This is also a fully voluntary program, like the original BPCI program is. However, unlike the original BPCI, which had 4 models depending upon the episode and the episode initiator and the period of the episode, be it 30, 60, or 90, this is much simpler. There's only one model here, which I'll go into in the next slide. Basically, it's an initiator model focused on physician practice groups and acute care hospitals. There is no Model 3 program here like there was in the original BPCI, which included the post-acute bundle. However, here the post-acute providers can still participate and, in fact, can be conveners under some circumstances. The BPCI or Advanced program starts this October 1st and ends December 31, 2023. So it's a 5-year program. There's one more opportunity for participants to join the BPCI, which is expected to start in January 2020. So high-level overview of this. This is a single retrospective bundled payment, one risk track, 90-day episode. So it's not a prospective payment, unlike other forms of value-based purchasing. There aren't multiple risk tracks like there are in some other payment models, including, for example, ACOs. And there's only one episode, period, unlike the original BPCI, which had a 30, 60, or 90. So it's much simpler in that respects. There are 29 inpatient and 3 outpatient clinical episodes which providers can choose from. Probably as importantly as anything in this discussion, this qualifies as an advanced payment model for purposes of the macro legislation. So I think physicians and PGPs will find, will be focusing a great deal of attention on this. There are changes to the amounts of payment based on various quality measures associated with the program and quality results, which I'll get into in a second. And Dave will get into this later, but the target prices here are projected to be provided in advance. Those haven't been made available yet, but we're going to spend some time at the back end of the webinar discussing specifically what those target prices are going to look like, how they're going to compare to facility costs, how they're going to compare to peer costs, et cetera. The stakeholders, who are the players in the BPCI Advanced? The program has 2 labels, conveners and non-convener participants. Conveners can basically be pretty much anybody. It can be an intermediary, it can be a Medicare provider, it can be a PGP or an acute care hospital. The key thing here, though, is that the parties that are effectively non-convener participants can only be PGPs or acute care hospitals. In other words, they have to be an episode initiator. And in this model, the episode initiator has to be a physician practice group or an acute care hospital. They can't, for example, be a post-acute company, home health, hospice, nursing home. It has to initiate with the PGP and ACH. And for that reason, it's our view, even though non-PGP and ACH players could be conveners here, it's probably more likely, in fact, highly likely that the initiators of these episodes will be at the PGP-ACH level. The episode initiator must elect 1 or more clinical episodes for bundles in the application on or before October 2018 and stick with that bundle through January 2020. So there's not an ability to sort of, elect an episode and do an add or a drop during, that 2-year period. I talked a little bit before about payment equality. Basically, this is very similar to BPCI, the original BPCI, in the sense that the providers continue to bill fee-for-service, and you're benchmarking the actual fee-for-service against the target pricing you were delivered in connection with the bundle award. Where the quality measures come in are, there's 7 quality measures. 2 of them, which are the Advanced Care Plan and all-cause hospital readmission, apply to all episodes. In other words, the results of those quality measures can increase or decrease the amount of the bundle payment and associated gain sharing that the providers receive, depending upon the results of those 2 quality measures. The other 5, and there's 5 other quality measures I won't go into, are sort of logically tied to the specific episode. So, for example, with lower extremity joint replacement, one of the quality indicators is the risk standardized complication rate for that procedure. So that particular quality measure ties to that particular episode. So depending upon the episode you choose, one or more of these quality measures may increase or decrease the amount of the reimbursement depending upon the performance of the provider group with respect to the quality measure. And like the BPCI, the government is going to be looking, CMS is going to be looking at the 30-day post-episode period of care just to assess whether there's any cost shifting beyond the episode period, as opposed to having it occur during the episode period. So that's I think, a consistent development. But basically, it's a total cost of care model. All participants at risk for use of providers. And as was the case with the BPCI, to the extent the patient, who always has freedom of choice, goes outside of the participant, the convener group, the participants are at risk for that. So that's consistent with the original BPCI, and in every other sense, I think it's really a much simpler model. So with respect to some of the metrics I discussed about quality and stop loss and how the pricing, this is a very high level at this point, but the quality metrics that I alluded to before, the 7 can increase and decrease payment by 10% sort of on a collared basis, either above or below the bundle payment. There's stop gain and stop loss payment at the episode initiator level of 20%. Which is consistent with some of the other bundle payment programs we've seen, like CJR. There's a 50% cap on the NPRA. That's the net payment reconciliation amount. That's essentially the difference between the bundle and the fee-for-service amount. That's a positive number that is shared with other providers that aren't initiators, so-called sharing partners. So, for example, this would include post-acute care companies. That amount, that NPR payment, is capped at 50% of the amount that otherwise would be paid under fee-for-service. And the all-important question of what the initial target pricing would be for these various episodes is going to be consistent with other models targeted at 3% discount to historical Medicare fee-for-service. And some of that is going to be adjusted, and we're going to discuss how that will be adjusted a little bit later with respect to peers and regional pricing. So with that high-level overview, I'm going to kick it over to my partner, Fred Guialphus. He's going to talk about the legal and regulatory framework associated with the balance of the BPCIA. Fred?
Thanks, Chris. Hello, everybody. As with other alternative payment programs that we've seen, the BPCIA will have Medicare programmatic waivers included with them. And they're ones that we have seen before in the BPCI, the original BPCI, as well as the CJR program. There will be a waiver, expected waiver of the 3-day acute care stay for SNF Medicare coverage. In this instance, as before, The qualified SNF must have 3 or more stars on the Compare website, or Compare, and be accepted as an eligible qualified SNF as posted on the CMS website. If you have compliance issues, you may not be able to qualify as a SNF in that instance. The beneficiary also has to be a BPCI beneficiary at the time of the discharge from the hospital, and the clinical episode, the primary diagnosis must be a clinical episode that's been accepted. We also have a telehealth payment policy waiver that's going to waive some of the otherwise applicable geographic area requirements for Medicare coverage. We've seen this waiver as well in certain other alternative payment programs. And there will be the post-discharge home visit payment waiver as well that's expected, so that Incident 2 services following the discharge from the procedure may be performed by non-physician personnel under general supervision. One thing that CMS is really focused on is trying to share best practices. And they have something called learning system activities that they're really pushing in BPCI. It's a structured approach to really sharing and applying quality improvement concepts, care redesign development, and good ideas that certain participants develop and share those with others. Applicants, which as Chris mentioned, can be both conveners or non-conveners, are offered opportunities to obtain from CMS resource documents about other ideas for care redesign. But participants are actually required, those that are actually accepted into the program, they're required they will be required in their BPCI participant agreement to actively participate in and help shape these learning system activities. Amongst the approaches that they talk about utilizing will be facilitate peer learning and information sharing, group learning approaches, required participant visits with each other, topic-specific webinars, virtual collaborations, sharing interim results, and showing high performers. So they really are focused on let's see what's working and let's make sure everybody's aware of those and get and provide opportunities for all participants to be able to accept those successful structures. There also is going to be more robust modeling in the BPCI program. CMS is going to measure and monitor throughout the bundle a variety of activities to ensure that the objectives are met and to ensure medically necessary care is not restricted. So again, participants will be required to comply with monitoring by CMS. They'll have to do reporting and tracking of data. They'll have to allow site visits, participate in interviews and surveys, look at service utilization, look at referral patterns, tracking patient complaints, and assessing outcomes. They're also very worried, CMS is very worried about making sure that there's no cutback on medically necessary care. And they will be reviewing this as part of these monitoring activities. So they're really going to assess performance sort of pre and post participation in BPCA to see what kind of behavior is changed by participation. And if they're finding things, they can move in and institute plans of correction and other activities as well that could lead to termination if they don't like what they're seeing. As with other alternative payment models, we're also seeing a lot of beneficiary protections. Beneficiary free choice of providers is sacrosanct, as it is in many of the programs. Medicare individuals, Medicare qualified enrollees must be able to choose their own providers, and there can be no restraints on free choice. Once a beneficiary decides where they're having their procedure, though, they can't opt out if they receive it from a BPCI participant. So there's no opting in or opting out based on beneficiary choice. So if they pick a BPCI participant and they have a procedure there that's a covered clinical episode, then they're in for the 90-day duration. And participants, as before, must notify beneficiaries of their participation in BPCA, and they also have to require episode initiators that are downstream to also do so, as well as participating providers. As of today, there have been no fraud and abuse waivers proposed for BPCI-A, although they are expected. CMS has the authorization to issue waivers, and it's assumed that they'll be comparable to the Model 2 waivers of the original BPCI. And as you'll recall, the Model 2 waivers really focused on sharing of the savings, either be from internal cost savings or from the difference between the target and the actual performance. And the distribution of those were really the focus on how waivers could be utilized. There also, as you'll recall, in BPCI, original BPCI, there was a waiver for in-kind patient engagement incentives, where benefits to where episode initiators and awardees could offer beneficiary inducements, essentially, transportation, free equipment, and the like to help monitor the program. Those are okay, expected to be okay. We expect another beneficiary inducement a waiver to be part of the program, but again, as of today, there have been no waivers proposed yet. Another key question is, okay, I'm participating in the MSSP. Can I also participate in BPCIA? And the answer is generally yes. You can. BPCIA is not a shared savings model program, so you can participate in both the Medicare Shared Savings Program, the Next Generation ACO program, along with BPCA. Although CMS reserves the right to add requirements if they find problems as they move forward with this. They do have a hierarchy, though, of methodology for ensuring that we don't get double payment and the like. So for the clinical episodes in the BPCA are excluded for Medicare beneficiaries aligned to Next Generation ACOs, the ACO, Vermont Medicare ACO Initiative, Track 3 of the Medicare Shared Savings Program, and the End-Stage Renal Disease Care Seamless Care Organization that has downside risk. If you're in the CJR program and you participate in that, you can't participate in the BPCA for the same clinical episodes that are included in the CJR program. And if you're in the Oncology Care Model program, you're allowed to participate in BPCA, but CMS is going to adjust the OCM performance-based payments for payments based on the proportion of BCI clinical episodes that overlap with the OCM. So at this point, I would love to turn the program over to Dave Terry. Dave?
Great. Thanks, Fred. Thanks, Kristen, Chris, Fred, for organizing this and for including us. Just a little bit about Archway Health. So we are a bundle payment company. We've been working in all the Medicare bundle payment programs since they were initiated back in 2011. We have been a convener in the BPCI program. Many of you folks may know, may have worked with conveners. Essentially, in that scenario, we take the contract with Medicare and then help manage the program on behalf of the providers that we're working with. We've also helped other providers and health systems create their own convener, and then we provide services to those folks with data analytics and program support and patient tracking tools and those types of things. From our perspective, the BPCI program has been terrific. We've seen many different types of providers, including large health systems and orthopedic groups and cardiologists, as well as post-acute providers, improve care, help their patients get home, particularly patients who are sick and been part of an acute care episode, help them get home faster and stay home. We've seen significant reductions in the cost of care, typically anywhere from 12 to 18% reductions in the cost of an episode over a 90-day period. And everyone we're working with is earning savings. We've got health systems hospitals that are earning as much as $12 million per year in new revenue through these programs, and then specialty physician groups who are earning as much as $100,000 per year in new revenue per physician. So it's been a good experience for most, and as you know, the Medicare just opened the window for the BPCI Advanced program. This is the first open window period we've had since 2014 in the BPCI. We've been eagerly awaiting this new program. It was announced by CMS about 2 years ago and was supposed to be initiated back in the spring. They finally came out with the rules at the beginning of January, but we're very enthusiastic that the window is now open, and we're seeing significant demand from all different types of providers, really. Large health systems, community hospitals, lots of orthopedic groups, lots of cardiology groups have been interested, seeing hospitalist providers express interest. Demand is quite high in the program. And so what I'm going to do is walk through our approach to the program. So I'm looking at this bundle payment process slide here. So there is some concern and even complaint that we've heard over the years that these programs can be complicated. We've tried to boil it down to a relatively straightforward 4-phase process. So where we are currently is in the pre-program activities phase, and there's this application process that we're in right now. Applications are due 2 weeks from today, and then that quickly gets us into a preliminary opportunity assessment. So I'm going to walk through a bunch of data that we have and that we've worked with over the years to help providers understand what the size of their program looks like, what the opportunities are, how that breaks down per episode. There are 32 episodes, as Chris mentioned, in the current program, and we can look for every provider across the country. We can see what those look like, what the volume is, what the total costs are, how those break down across acute and post-acute providers. And that's really a big part of the first phase is that bundle analysis and bundle selection and opportunity assessment process. Then there's the whole application activity and submitting a contract to CMS. Second phase really is picking 2 or 3 areas as a provider organization where you feel like you can have an impact. We've seen a tendency early on in these programs for folks to really try to boil the ocean and do everything at once, but what we learned is combination of looking at the data and understanding what the capabilities are of a particular organization can be very effective just to pick a couple things that if you make a big impact, it can have or focus on those few things, it can have a pretty big impact. And these include, it could be gain sharing with your specialists, it could be developing a tighter preferred post-acute network, or developing protocols in certain clinical areas, or working with a discharge planning team, thinking about transitions of care. There's a whole host of things that providers can implement, but in our experience, if you just pick 2 or 3 and have a focus on those, you can have a big impact. And then think about process design and care redesign around those 2 or 3 areas. The third phase is once the program goes live. So as Chris mentioned, this program starts on October 1st of this year. So the key in our experience there is being able to track both your program financial performance as well as real-time health status of the patients that are in the program. And, great thing about the bundle payment programs with Medicare is you're going to get a tremendous amount of data. And many times this is data that providers, claims data that providers have not had a lot of experience with. And so when you start the program, you'll get your pricing information as well as 3 years of baseline historical data. And then once you submit your application. Once the program goes live, you'll get new data every month, and you can see, the way we do it, we put all the data on the web. You can see, as soon as that data is available, you can see how many patients you're caring for in the program, what their costs are at that point in time, what your volume is overall by episode, by physician, what's happening when you send a patient to post-acute providers. You can see that overall and by provider. You want to look at your reconciliations, and you can see kind of mock reconciliations and estimates of how you're performing financially in the program. And those tools and dashboards are typically targeted at the program management team and the finance team. And then you also want to track the health status of your patients. Obviously, it's very different from fee-for-service, where you're just seeing patients and focused on them when they're in your facility or in your office. In a bundle, now you're responsible for everything that happens to that patient over a 90-day period, and you want to be able to know how those patients are doing, who's on track, who's off track, who you want to intervene with, who may be headed for some sort of adverse event, whether it's an ER visit or a readmission or something. And so the ability to track that progress is key. And the last part here, phase 4, is probably one of the most exciting in the area where we kind of have get the most satisfaction is once the provider organization is managing within a bundle, it tends to do a couple things. One is you have all this data. It tightens the continuum of care. It increases the attention that patients get, from the point when they're really sick in the hospital to the point when they're getting better, hopefully within that 90-day period. And through that process and through that data and through the collaboration with the specialists and other clinicians in the process, we just start to see all kinds of ways to improve and lots of innovation. And we typically bring the providers together on a regular basis and talk about what's working and what's not. Have very high-level clinical discussions about what clinical techniques work, what care management things are making a difference. And we can do this from a kind of a macro perspective. We also have the ability to dive down and look at individual patients and see, for particularly challenging cases, what worked and what could have worked differently. So the continuous improvement is something that is just very different in programs like this than what we typically see in fee-for-service. So now I'm going to spend a fair amount of time walking through some of the data that we look at. So, and again, there's a lot of data here, but just thinking about all the different types of information that the providers can look at in this program. So this is a national view. So we have taken all of the 32 episodes that Medicare has created for BPCI Advanced and looked at all the volume across the country by episode, and then broken it down into what the costs are per episode and how those costs break down by type of service. So the last column, the different colors in those bars represent the blue portion is the inpatient admission or the anchor stay, and then the red portion is readmissions. The orange portion is skilled nursing facility care. And, in some of these episodes, like CHF, we see as much as 40 to 45% readmission rate in major joint replacement. You can see a huge portion of the bar is orange because a big chunk of that is for nursing home care. And so one thing we want to look at is what is the total cost of an episode and what are the opportunities to drive improvement. And a big driver of that improvement is the variability that we see across the country. So this next slide here is looking at the average cost per case, or it's actually a number of different things here. So one is the total volume of episodes, major joint episodes by state. So you can see quite a different variability, obviously, from high population states to lower population states. But then we're looking at the next column, the light blue column, is the cost per case in those states. So if we look at a state like California, where the average cost per major joint case is about $23,000, the next one down is Florida. The average cost per case is $26,000. And so we've already adjusted this for wage index factors and other geographic anomalies. So on apples-to-apples basis, there's about a $3,000 difference in the cost of care. And you can see going across to the right here, in California, the readmission rate is 8%. In Florida, it's 10%. Small difference, but it's significant across so many different episodes. The SNF utilization in California is 31% versus 38% in Florida. We see this type of variability everywhere. And there's some sentiment that these programs are really more focused on procedures, but we see this variability in COPD, CHF, sepsis. We're not as part of the BPCI program, but we're participating in the oncology care model. We see this type of variability in cancer. And so when we think about bundle payment, what Medicare is really trying to go after here is this variability, and try to understand how this variability can be managed more proactively by the clinicians and by the providers who care for the patients. In our experience, these programs work best when we can really get the specialists engaged in the process, along with the teams that they work with, to think about how to improve the process, how to reduce this variability, and help people get home as quickly and safely as possible. So that was a national view. I'm now going to drill into a particular provider example, and so this is a real snapshot of data for a relatively large hospital, and this is looking at how many cases across their whole hospital and across all 32 BPCI episodes they would have in the program. So these folks are managing about 3,200 episodes, about $74 million of bundle spend, $44 million of post-acute spend. And this is just looking at their SNF utilization, their length of stay, their readmission rates compared to others in their state. And so across their whole program of about $73 million, they've got about a $7 to $8 million savings opportunity. And this is at a high level. We can then drill down and look at this by episode. And so, this is the same hospital. This is looking at their volume and their cost breakdown by episode. And so if we, I'll just pick one here to talk about, but just looking at the top episode here, congestive heart failure. They did 312 cases. This is fiscal 2016 data. About $7.5 million of total spend. Their readmission rate is 43%. Their SNF utilization rate is 31%. Their ER utilization rate is 44%. Total cost of about $24,000 per episode. Then what typically we do is do some benchmarking. So this next slide is looking at same set of episodes, same total cost per case. But what we've done here on the two columns on the right, column, the light green column, second from the right, we've compared this particular hospital, their performance, to the 25th percentile performer in their region by bundle. So it could be one comparison for CHF and a different hospital for major joint, but just asking the question: if this particular hospital got to the 25th percentile performer in each episode, how much opportunity would they have for improvement and for savings? And so again, just looking at CHF, if they get to the 25th percentile performer in CHF, they could save about $3,300 per episode, or just over $900,000 per year across their CHF population. And again, it's not all about the money. That savings is coming from reducing readmissions and helping patients get home faster and stay home. And we've seen that work by, again, engaging the specialists and the caregivers in the process, tightening the continuum, tracking patients more closely, and really kind of managing this population of relatively, folks who have had some sort of acute event or an exacerbation of a chronic illness, managing them in a more proactive way. The last column is another way to look at the opportunity. And what we've done here is we've taken the BPCI Advanced pricing model. And so all of the details of the pricing model have not been published yet, but we've taken what's been published so far and developed pricing estimates for every provider. And we've compared their historical performance to those estimated or preliminary prices. So in this example, again, looking at CHF, this particular hospital, if they chose that episode, if they chose to participate in CHF and did nothing to improve, they would lose money. So they're essentially, based on the price, they've got some work to do to improve. Now that said, they've got significant opportunity if they do improve, that $3,300 per case if they get to the 25th percentile. But there are two ways to do well in these programs. One is what your pricing looks like to your current performance, and the other is how much you could save if you get to sort of benchmark performance. And those are the types of things that we look at. That last column will change once they publish all of the pricing spec, but we're estimating for now based on what they've published so far. So then the next question is, so now we've looked at what the opportunity is for a particular hospital. This next slide is starting to ask the question, what do we need to do to improve? So if we chose to participate in CHF, what is it that we would need to do to actually, or what are the opportunities for us to actually drive improvement? So this is a snapshot of a couple dozen or so hospitals in Massachusetts and their volume. Again, this is looking at CHF. This is their volume of cases. The blue bar here is the volume of cases. The next bar is the number of physicians that are treating those patients, and the light blue bar is their cost per episode. And then when I look at the top here, where it says hospital benchmark, this is what the 25th percentile performer looks like. So top tier, and it's not saying that 1 percentile, it's top quartile, so relatively good, but not unreachable. Top tier performers averaging managing these cases, these patients for about $20,000 an episode with a 34% readmit rate and a 27% SNF utilization rate. If I look at this first performer here, the highest volume hospital, their readmit rate's a little bit higher than the top performer. Their SNF rate is a good bit higher. Their inpatient rehab facility utilization is also higher. So these are some places to start to look to see what is it that we can do to take our costs from about $22,000 per episode to closer to the $20,000 to $20,600 per episode. And we can continue to drill down on this and look at what how those opportunities might break down. So this is looking at the physician level. So again, just a sample hospital and looking to see, of the physicians that care for patients in this population, what is the average cost per case? I blinded the names of the physicians here, obviously, but we have the ability to look at the individual physician level on an unblinded basis to see, within our organization, who's doing a good job and who could do a better job. And, believe me, we understand that the data is not the whole story. There certainly could be explanations for why one physician is doing this differently than another. But in our experience, to be candid, is that, typically in fee-for-service, we're just not looking at the data at this level of granularity. And that's one of the big things that makes a difference, that has made a difference in the programs we've been involved with so far, is the ability to take a very data-driven approach and really kind of almost take a blank sheet of paper and look at the data and try to redesign the way we're delivering the care for patients in a very specific population, get the clinicians engaged, get the case management teams and post-acute providers engaged, and trying to really diagnose what's happening, who's doing well, and how we can learn from those folks who are doing well to improve the process. Then another level of granularity is looking at post-acute providers. So this slide here is looking at just where are the patients going. So this is all the patients who went from a particular hospital who got discharged to a SNF, and I, again, blinded the names of the SNFs here, but we can look and see which SNFs patients are going to. And this is relatively common. I mean, we're looking, there's just not, we see patients going to many, many different post-acute providers, whether it's skilled nursing facilities or home health agencies. There's a lot of scattering of patients to different facilities, and then the performance among those facilities is quite variable. So you can see this top the skilled nursing facility here, they got 7 patients. Their readmit rate is 56%. Their ER utilization rate is 69%. The next one down is 40% ER utilization rate, and readmission rate, and a 39% ER rate. So again, data doesn't tell the whole story, but it begins to help us to, assess the folks that we're working with, who's taking care of our patients, and where we might see opportunities for improvement. And I think, Kristen, with that, we need to pause here. Am I right about that?
Yes. Now, we are going to pause for a moment. At this time, I'm going to read the CLE code for this program. And once I read it, I will open up a polling question. If you are in need of CLE's credit today, you need to enter the 5-digit code into the poll and then press submit. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the poll in 1 minute. The code for this session is X, Y, Y, A, W. Again, it's X, Y, Y, A, W. And I'll give a moment for folks that are in need of CLE codes to please complete that question. And again, if you are in Kansas, New York, and New Jersey, in addition to completing the polling question, you do need to complete the attestation form and return it after the webinar. And again, that form can be found in the resource list. Okay, the poll is now closed. And I'm going to turn it back over to Dave.
Great. Thanks, Kristen. So we want to leave some time for questions here. So I'm going to go quickly through these next set of slides. And just, not that quickly though, sorry. So, one of the things we found that's very effective is the ability to, and I mentioned this earlier, but the ability to track patients over the course of the episode. So this is a view of our, what we call CareLink, and this is a dashboard that we've created. And the audience for this is the care management team. Generally, it's a care management team at the provider organization. Sometimes we take on this role, but generally it's done at the provider organization. And this is just a view of all the patients that you have in a bundle payment program and what their current health status is, and are they on track. And there are really only 2 goals for this dashboard. One is to help manage the time of make the care manager as effective and efficient as possible, so that they're just paying attention to those patients who are off track and need attention. And the second is to give ideally an early indication of who's off track and maybe headed for an adverse event, so that the care team can intervene with those folks and hopefully get them back on track. I mentioned results. So we're seeing, as I mentioned, anywhere from 12 to 18, in some cases as much as 20% savings per episode, and we're seeing it across surgical and medical conditions. This is just a snapshot of 3 of the higher volume episodes: major joint, COPD, CHF. The savings tend to come from different places and different types of episodes, often from SNF, skilled nursing facility utilization, inpatient rehab facility, readmissions are some of the bigger areas. But we're also seeing it from reducing Part B costs and ambulance services and other types of services. In terms of the process and the timeline, so the timeline is tight, as I think you probably know. Application is due 2 weeks from today. There's been some folks wondering if Medicare is going to extend the deadline. We're pretty certain that they will not extend. They talked about this on the Open Door Forum or webinar sponsored by CMS 2 weeks ago. They really need to be in a position to be able to go live on October 1, because the current bundle payment program ends at the end of September. And there's a number of things. There's a sort of a domino effect here. They need to get these applications and receive them at CMS so that they can start creating the pricing and creating the data and enabling people to make decisions. If you get on an application, you'll get your pricing data and your baseline data in May. You'll have until the end of July to assess that data and decide if you want to get into a program, definitively commit to participating in the program. Participation agreements need to be executed by late July, early August, and then the program itself starts on October 1. The application is pretty robust. There's about 40 questions or so. I spent a big chunk of the weekend answering these questions. So at Archway, we are a convener. We are applying to the program. We will probably apply with 100 or so provider organizations, acute care hospitals and physician group practices. There are really two ways to participate. One is to work with a convener like us, and we can help you get in, submit the application, or there are other conveners out there that can help with that as well. Or you can apply on your own as a convener participant. So those are really the two basic options. And with that, why don't we? I think we've got a few minutes left. Why don't we open it up for questions?
Thanks, Dave. As a reminder, if you have any questions, you can type them into the Q&A widget, and we do have a couple that have come through, so I'll go ahead and read them out. The first question is, how do we get access to our own data?
So a couple different things. As a convener and a participant in these organizations, for many years now, we have all of the Medicare data for the last 5 years. That's really where the information came from that I walked through on those data slides. So, if we're doing, a bunch of WebExes every day where we're showing the data to the two providers who are interested in seeing that type of information that I just showed. So that's, we'd be happy to share that with you. If you reach out to us, we can set up a time to do that. If you apply to the program, you'll get, as I mentioned, you'll get 3 years of baseline data. It really, in our experience, providers really need to work with someone, whether it's us or someone else. The data comes in kind of flat claims files. It's pretty hard to work with. We've programmed, as you saw, all the episodes in already, and it's in Tableau and easy to access. So, one way to get data is to, talk to us or someone like us in the short term, and we can show you the information, and then you'll get more of your own data in May if you apply, and, chances are you need to work with someone to help you interpret that data and look at the data.
Okay. The next question really ties into that, and is what exactly are we looking for in the data to help decide whether or not to participate?
Yeah, so there are a couple different things to look at. Things we look at are, what's your volume per episode? What's the mix of cost? How much of the costs are inpatient and associated with the anchor stay, and how much of the costs are post-acute and more variable and more manageable? What your opportunities are on a benchmarking basis. Those are some of the key things to look at. Okay.
The next question, do the results from the original BPCI Model 2 help in planning for BPCI Advanced?
I could take that one. I think they clearly do. The results from the original BPCI show that major joint replacements were selected by the majority, 60%, and congestive heart failures were the second most selected clinical episode. Participating hospitals generally had higher baseline costs, as Dave was mentioning, more opportunities for good performance. It was also interesting that gain sharing was utilized by only 18% of the awardees, and they only 8% shared internal cost savings. Also, the waivers were not utilized very significantly. We were talking before the presentation today that this may be that people were just getting their feet warm on some of these activities and being comfortable with the bundled payment program. But so the opportunity for gain sharing really could lead to some better performance, and the beneficiary and the participating hospital programmatic waivers could also lead to some opportunities. So I think we expect to see better utilization of some of these waivers moving forward.
Yeah, I agree with you. This is Chris Donovan. Fred, that the 3-day hospital stay waiver that is part of BPCI was part of it and is going to be part of it. I was kind of surprised just to see the really low, frankly, level utilization of that waiver. And it's actually consistent if you look at some of the data with respect to ACOs and other bundle payment programs that CMS has rolled out. There's an interesting just sort of absence of use of some of the waivers. And it to me, I think, Dave, you had alluded to it before that, sort of anecdotally you hear that some of these programs can be rather complicated. And I think what the lack of utilizing that waiver suggests is probably a lack of engagement to some extent between acute and post-acute and the various elements of the care plan. And really that's, in my view, what's critical to make these things work. So I'm hoping, this is a lot simpler model than the 4 models with BPCI. It has, it doesn't have Model 3 maybe, and some people were not happy about that, but it's one episode. You get the target prices up front, and, there's incentives there to, reward successful providers. And I'm hoping and frankly somewhat optimistic that the waivers will be utilized more, and you'll see more gain sharing like you were saying, Fred. Because this is sort of another, this is kind of bundle payment 0.02 now, and I think you're going to find some of the people that did the initial BPCI are now going to be much more sophisticated at it, and with the help of companies like Dave's, we'll be able to more deliver real savings and better outcomes. Kristen, do you want to tee up another question?
Yeah, I was going to say thanks, Chris. I just wanted to. The next question is, when will the final pricing data be available?
Yeah, so a couple different steps in the process here. So I mentioned that the pricing formulas or spec, the Medicare release, they released part of it 2 weeks ago. They said recently that within the next couple of weeks they'll release hopefully the rest of all the details. So as soon as those details are available, we will update our models and run them through our data to be able to develop more granular estimates of what those prices look like for providers across the country. So that's the first step. That should be released in the next couple of weeks. For providers who apply to the program, Medicare is saying that they will release provider-specific prices to the applicants in May. And at that time, you'll get your prices and you'll get your baseline data, and then you'll have a couple months, to the end of July, to decide, if you want to move forward in the program in a formal way. What we do here is we get all that data. The providers we work with, we get all that data, we analyze it, we identify what the opportunities are, and we help advise folks participate in the program. The application process is, with us, it's a non-binding process. There's no cost to it. The goal really is to help providers figure out if they want to participate, and then make that decision in July, and then decide if they want to work with us or someone else at that point.
Yeah, I might just add that if you're thinking about applying, you're not going to complete this application in a day or two. It's going to be more involved than that. There are some questions that you have to answer that can really take some analysis and thought. But I think, as Dave has talked about in the past, there's really an opportunity to apply, get your data, look at your data, and then decide after that whether you really want to continue to participate. But if you miss the application deadline of March 12th, you are precluded. So that's just something to keep in mind as you consider whether you're going to participate in the program.
Yeah, that's a good point, Fred. So we're however folks get into it, with us or with someone else or on your own, we're strongly encouraging providers to apply. This application that's due on the 12th, it's non-binding. In a couple pluses to it. It preserves your option to participate starting October 1 if you want to do that. It gets you your data, and it gets you your pricing. And so at that point, you can make a much more informed decision once you see the data as to whether it makes sense for you. And if nothing else, the data is extraordinarily rich to see how the costs break down within your organization, and then you can do benchmarking across organizations, and it's a great way to kind of strategically assess where you are in your market relative to others, and then at least consider participating in a value-based program. The other portion of this, I know Fred mentioned this, but this is one of the few programs that qualify as an advanced alternative payment model within MACRA, which can be much better path to pursue than MIPS for many physician organizations. And so at least evaluating whether this will help you qualify for that is another reason to get the data.
Okay, I think we have time for one last question. So how would ancillary providers and suppliers such as device manufacturers and pharmacies go about becoming involved in this program?
I mean, this is Kristen, and guys, feel free to weigh in. I think what this is going to, there's been some press that I've read recently from the large medical device, particularly like the orthopedic companies, that are trying to really embrace value-based payment methodologies and understanding how providers are being engaged on this process with initiatives like this BPCI program. And I think what you're going to start to see more of, and it may come from both just looking at it from the device side for a second, both from the manufacturer side as well as the provider side, is different types of pricing models that are tied to performance. So, looking at all the slides, Dave, you had there with the readmission rate and the variability of the readmission rate, with respect to lower joint extremity, et cetera. I mean, if part of that is associated, for example, with an infection control sleeve on some implant that fails, I can see, when you're pricing these bundles for hospitals, they're going to assume that perhaps the readmission risk isn't associated with the device, or put another way, the device performs as it's supposed to. And I guess where I'm going with this is I've been seeing much more attention paid to taking some kind of risk-adjusted pricing methodology on the part of medical device manufacturers, to use an example, in connection with the sale of their products to hospitals and doctors, such that to some extent, if there is a readmission or a failure on the device parts that attributable to the device, that the manufacturer will stand behind the costs of not just the replacement of the device, but the care associated with that. So, I think as we get further deeper into value-based purchasing, you're going to see more and more of that, and in connection with drug pricing and performance-based coding, et cetera. I think we're going to start to see more of that. So I think if manufacturers are interested in getting involved with it, they should engage with hospitals and physician practices that are at the upper end of engaging in value-based purchasing.
Yeah, so so in this program, BPCI Advanced, Part D drugs are not included in the episode, but we are very active in the oncology care model program, and Part D drugs are included in that. And we're in a number of discussions with pharma companies. For many years, folks in many parts of healthcare have made the argument that by using their tool or their device or their service, the total cost of care comes down. With episodes, we're able to prove that over different periods of time. And so in the oncology care model, we're talking to some pharma companies about looking at, what happens when a breast cancer patient, say, is on a particular drug, particular type of chemo, versus when they're on another type of chemo. Is it more effective from an outcomes perspective? And also, what happens in terms of hospitalization use and ER utilization and other types of costs? So certainly the drug companies in the oncology program are very interested in looking at that, and the data facilitates this in a new way. Similarly, in this program, as Chris mentioned, device companies and orthopedics are interested in this. We are working with a drug company that has a cardiology drug that they have data that shows that it reduces the risk of a second AMI post-discharge for initial AMI, and this program helps create an economic rationale for that, and they're interested in working with hospitals who are pursuing these programs to help prove that and to have their drug use more because it reduces that second AMI. So we are seeing, I think it's still early on that front, but we are certainly seeing device manufacturers and drug companies try to understand what the data means for them and partner in their providers in different ways based on that.
Well, thank you all. I invite everyone on this program to please feel free to reach out and contact any of our presenters today. Their contact information is currently on the screen, or you can reach out to me and I'd be happy to connect you with them directly. I'd like to thank our presenters. It was a great program. I really appreciate your time. And just a reminder that today's program is being recorded and will be available on Foley.com within the next few days, so I will make sure I send out an email once that's available. And at the conclusion of this program, a questionnaire will appear, and we would appreciate your feedback. If you would just take a moment, your feedback is important to us to help continuously improve these programs, and I would appreciate your time. This wraps up our web conference today, and thank you all for attending.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.